Thank you very much for joining me on the Voice of Job Seekers. This is Mark, and we're back with another show. Going to do something unprecedented here. Going to using some of the trinkets that Prezi has to offer while talking to Tom Spiggle from Spiggle Law Firm. And going to release a video first instead of the podcast, which I usually do. So there's going to be a version of first, but many of you will see the video first. So first of all, welcome, Tom, back to the show. How are you?
Good, Mark. Glad to be here.
Well, glad that you're able to make a little time for me. You are, if you're not writing, if you're not with clients, and if you're not on television, uh, that leaves little time for yourself. So I want to catch you when we can. First of all, let's kind of dive right into it. A lot of people are just unclear about some of the federal guidelines to unemployment, how they're expanded, and what the difference is between getting unemployment now as opposed to like back in late January or early February. First of all, those most people will experience the expansion of unemployment benefits. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, there have been a huge employment law generally for employees, but particularly for unemployment benefits, there's been a sea change now that this new legislation just passed about who's eligible and who is not.
Mm-hmm. And so the people who are eligible, if you've already been receiving unemployment from past employers, will you be receiving those particular those benefits?
You mean if you've already been getting unemployment
Yes,
insurance
correct.
benefits?
Correct.
I think it depends on the state. So these are being administered through the state. You can
Mm-hmm.
go, of course, to your state. For example, in Virginia, it's called the VEC, the Virginia Employment Commission.
Mm-hmm.
But a good website, a general website, if you go to US www.dol.gov, departmentof labor.gov, they have a single page there that will link to that has a drop down that it will show you to go for each state.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll probably be state by state. I think it depends on when that act went into effect. But I suspect that if you're already getting unemployment insurance benefits, that you probably will be able to get. For example, they've extended the time frame that you can get them. So now up to 13 weeks and up to $600 on top of what you're normally getting. I suspect that you will be able to get those, but it does vary by state.
Right, right. So it's going to differ. It's going to be a different look. Let's say if somebody was working a contract already, they were getting benefits and they get on a contract. Of course, when you get on a contract, you get off. A lot of times it's harder to get back on once that contract ends. Let's say it's a short contract, 2 or 3 months. Are there any federal provisions for that, or is that going to be state by state as well?
That will be state by state as well, but I think generally there's a lot that's going to be changed about unemployment insurance. For instance, like requirements that you provide information about looking for a job. I mean, I think like some of the states are going to be dropping those. The federal government is doing everything they can to get money in people's pockets. So I think that you'll find that even for those folks who are off it and back on it, that you're going to find an expedited process to get that unemployment insurance benefits. Another, big change with unemployment benefits is now the contractors, you mentioned getting on a contract, but that made me think about contractors and gig workers. These folks have traditionally not been available for unemployment insurance. So your Uber drivers, your Instacart drivers, in a lot of cases, or gig workers, all these folks are now available for unemployment insurance. So, even people who historically have not been able to apply should find out. I mean, I think it's actually going to be rare now that it's going to be an exception that people are not eligible than that they are. I mean, the exception will be there'll be a smaller pool of people who are not eligible. Whereas before was a fairly, it could be a substantial one. So, I'd say contact your state unemployment office or go to the website. And most people, I think, are going to be covered under this new policy.
Yeah, and even if you have a doubt, you should go and find out. And if you get a no, at least you'll know where your boundaries are.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And there are, and we can talk about whichever part of this you want. I mean, they are also expanded, sick leave benefits for employees. Their expanded Family Medical Leave Act for employees. I mean, significant expansion. So even for those folks who are still at work, who are looking for protections, there's new loans coming out from the Small Business Administration. I mean, these are not coming to, although they are coming to, even if you are what they call a solopreneur,
Mhm.
you're a one-person operation, you don't have to have employees to be able to get some of these SBA fundings. But, the other good news for people who have a job or are looking for one is that employers are essentially rewarded for keeping payroll the same.
Mhm.
So because the federal government wants to keep people working. So again, these aren't direct, if you're an employee, these aren't funds that you can get directly, but you should know and perhaps be having a conversation with your employer, if there are layoffs coming, about the fact that this new Paycheck Protection Act, the PPP as it's called, and this is changing daily as to what this is going to look like and who's getting funded. But
Mhm.
generally the idea is they want employers to keep payroll stable, which will have give people the opportunity to keep the job that they're in. So that's another big change is going to be benefiting employees in what is understandably a really rough time for folks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot of these things, we're all diving into pages where we've never been before.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some people need to make the effort to find out what their state requirements are and what provisions are provided by law. Let's go back to sick leave for a little bit. I know there are different aspects of leave, and there are few states that have spelled it out.
Yes.
Um, Such as and there's the obvious one if you're under FMLA for family, whether you're taking care of sick or you're taking care of yourself. I know a lot of people are concerned because they have employers that they don't feel like they're protected against the virus, and they might be in the service industry, such as healthcare workers is a big concern about their
Yeah.
ability to take sick leave and what's going to be provided for them, or for the fact that they may be afraid to take sick leave. Are there some, would they be covered under a sick leave to get paid by law, or is that would that be something the employer would have to spell out for them?
Yeah. So this is another good place to go to that DOL website. They have right page there, coronaviruses. There's some great, pretty, non-legalese kind of resources there for folks. Generally, employees of family, there's been a significant expansion. So now, and this is a big difference, for at least for coronavirus related leave, all employers are covered now. It used to be, right, that FMLA only covered employers that have 50 or more employees, which
Right.
left a lot of people FMLA. That's no longer the case. It's all employers. I think now the requirement is you only have to have worked there for 3 days to be
Hmm.
eligible for the leave. It does not, however, cover healthcare workers. So, it's sort of unfortunate because these folks are on the front lines, but these new expanded provisions don't expand to workers, doctors, and nurses. I mean, there might be some debate as to who constitutes a healthcare worker or not, but generally these new expanded rights do not apply. But generally, if you have COVID related illness, or you are staying home to care for someone who does, or if you're under quarantine or under some kind of state stay at home order that
Hmm.
prevents you from coming into work, you get 2 weeks of paid leave at 100%. There is a cap on it. I think it's up to $511 a day. or $2,000 for the, I don't know if it's for the week or for the entire period, but you get
Hmm.
100% of the eligible federal leave for those 2 weeks. Beyond that, if you are, cannot work or cannot, if you can't get to work, for instance, because you have kids at home,
Hmm.
because a lot of schools, of course, have been closed because of
Right.
COVID. If you have kids at home and you can't work because of that, you are eligible for up to 10 weeks of additional leave at 2/3 the eligible rate. That's not your full salary, but 2/3 of the eligible rate under FMLA. And I think it's $211 a day for that 10-week period. It does apply to telework for people who are telework and could have intermittent leave. So I
Hmm.
need a few hours here. Well, let me say this: an employer is not required to give you intermittent leave. An employer can. So, if you are somebody who works from home and you're teleworking and you've got kids at home and you're like, hey, I can work 2 hours, here, but I got to have this chunk 4 hours off because my wife or my husband is going to be working then and I got to watch the kids. An employer
Hmm.
can give you intermittent leave, so you get paid for those times that you cannot be working when you have kids, but that's not required. The employer doesn't have to provide you that. But the Department of Labor, and again, these are changing daily too, but the Department of Labor has made it pretty clear that their expectation work with employees possible to kind of make this jigsaw puzzle work.
Right. Now, what if someone is in an environment like a hospital or a service-based industry where they are very vulnerable to the virus and the impact it could really have on their health more than, let's say, somebody who doesn't have asthma or doesn't have diabetes, somebody who had those that they're going to what is their way, or can they take and it might be a question you might have answered, but I just want to make it really, really plain and clear that there are people who are afraid to get the virus, but will take like a sick, maybe not a sick leave, but maybe intermittent sick leave, like a few days here, a few days there,
Yeah.
so that they can temper the impact that it might have on their health.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the DOL has made it pretty clear that fear alone of going into work is not reason enough to entitle you to leave. I mean, of course, if your employer provides some kind of paid leave, you can access that under your employer's, leave policy. So if you got the leave and you can take it for that reason, and you want to take a sick day, that depends on the individual policies. In terms of whether or not you're legally protected, I mean, to give you the lawyer answer, it depends, right? I mean,
Hmm.
employers under OSHA, OSHA guidance, so you can go to OSHA.gov to look for these. And there's state level guidance too. There are state level analog OSHA type offices that make it clear that an employer has to provide a safe working environment. Um, so whether you would be covered under that is a possibility.
Hmm.
The Americans with Disabilities Act might also apply if you have an underlying condition. For instance, you have bad asthma. You have some condition that let's say you've got symptoms. You could be covered under the ADA
Hmm.
and request an accommodation, which could include staying at home. Of course, if you have the virus itself, I mean, you've got FMLA coverage and job protection as well. So it's sort of all over the map. Again, alone is, let's say there's somebody that is infected, you could be covered by OSHA guidelines. Again, it just depends on the nature of what your workplace is and your own physical condition and the condition that you're worried about.
Well, there's a lot to unfold there for a lot of people. In essence, there are no straight answers to any of the concerns that you have. You have to kind of dig deeper into the Department of Labor information that they have. Some states have more information than others, is what I've found out in researching it. Like New Jersey has done really well in being pretty explicit on their site, as
Yes.
opposed to Illinois, not as much. But that's for a whole nother discussion. Yeah,
Yeah.
in other words, you've laid out the layers people can explore to see where they can qualify, whether it's disability, family medical leave, or sick leave, that there might be some way to kind of, because not every employer is responsible in providing protection for employees, but
Sure.
yet you know, small businesses tend, many of them, not all, tend to ride through the loopholes of the law.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something, a big change that we're seeing is a lot of small businesses now are covered under these, whereas they weren't before. But yeah, and I would say you're right. It's important for employees to be in communication with their employers, to have a dialogue about what's going on, maybe,
Mhm.
even more so than before about these healthcare concerns. And it is tough, for employees that are worried, about their own physical safety, for, what's going on in their workplace. The patchwork of laws is can be difficult. You can look at the DOL website, you can look at your
Mhm.
state agencies. I'm always a big fan, if you need to schedule a consult with an attorney. As Mark, NELA is a great resource regardless of where the state you're in. So that's NELA.org.
Yeah.
Have a great attorney finder site. Avo.com is another great site. You can go in and just look for employment lawyers and find somebody, pay for an hour of time if you need to help you kind of figure this out, because it is very difficult. And there may be situations where, and I've seen these come through. I mean, the people that are coming to our firm, intake sourcing, where people are getting
Hmm.
fired because they're refusing to come into work. And while that's understandable, sometimes that could be completely legal for an employer
Hmm.
to do that. So if you've got those questions before it gets to that point, be talking with your employer and be talking with an employment lawyer about what protections you may have. And then for those people, who, I mean, look, we know layoffs are, a bunch of them are happening. A bunch of people are
Hmm.
applying for unemployment insurance. Those are expanded. Those benefits are expanded pretty substantially. I think the issue will be mostly the administration of it.
Right.
I know, for example, like I was looking at Maryland's site the other day, and there are different days of the week you have to apply depending what your last name begins with. So
Mm.
I forget what it was,
Wow.
like, A through F apply on Monday, because they're just getting so many of them.
Right.
So I think that will be, it's not so much, I think they're trying to make people eligible. I think a lot of people are, many more than there would have been, and the paychecks are going to be bigger. It's just a question of holding on until you can get them.
Right. And I think there's still, and it's been a while since I've looked at it, but there are certain state bar associations that actually have like a pro bono day that they provide their state
Sure.
for people to come in to get free legal advice.
Yes.
So you might want to explore that and plan on attending that. It just helps to have, the more information you have, the better educated you can, and you can be, and the better consult experience you can have with people who are offering that kind of advice.
Absolutely. Yes. And there are a lot of people doing podcasts and webinars. We'll be doing a
Yes.
webinar on Tuesday of next week for employees about a lot of these issues. So keep your eye out for those. There's some law firms who are doing, reduced fee or free consult for, COVID related inquiries. So there's help out there if you look for it.
Right. And I really recommend people going to your podcast, the I Got Fired podcast, and the Parents at Work podcast, as well as the your video channels, where there's a plethora of resources, information, as well as your site where you have a blog, and you go into great detail into one of your latest blogs, and where you have a video of what people can expect. Of course, things are changing every day, and of course, you want to look for the latest information, and you are always on the cutting edge, or practically daily. So I really appreciate it, and spend some time with us here on the Voice of Job Seekers.
Yes, well, and thanks for all the hard work. We've talked a number of times, and folks like you, I mean, are invaluable. I'm often sending people to your site, and because look, this is, going to end at some point. People are going to be, some employers are already hiring now. And you and I just did a podcast recently about some of your great tips on, how to get back on your feet,
Hmm.
start looking for a job, because we're going to get through this and people are
Yep.
going to get back to work again. And like you say, keep up those networks, like, yeah, get your unemployment. You got to keep food on the table, but,
Yep.
don't, keep tilling, keep weeding that, that garden, that career garden that you have.
Yeah, well, thank you. And for the rest of you, thank you for joining us. You're going to see this up today. So for the rest of you who are listening on the podcast, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for holding me down for all these years. I'm down to the last few podcasts for the year before I take my hiatus, where I do a bunch of writing. Uh, in the meantime, again, join me next time, and have a great week. Stay safe.